It was late at night. Air was thick with the smell of wet asphalt as I zipped down the quiet street, the electric scooter humming beneath me. Sensed that something was about to go wrong. I glanced at my phone just a few blocks to home. My mind wandered to the test I'd bombed that morning, the argument with my dad, the ache in my chest that I tried to outrun. I lay on my back, rain soaking through my clothes, the cold creeping into my bones. Every pulse sent a fresh wave of agony through my shattered leg. I tried to focus on my breathing to keep panic at bay, but the pain was relentless. I remember the ambulance doors closing, the world reduced to the harsh glare of fluorescent lights and the steady beep of a monitor. Doctors hovered over me, their faces masked, eyes intent. They asked questions, checked pulses, poked and prodded. The pain was a living thing gnawing at my nerves, making it hard to think. I heard the words compound fracture, open wound, risk of infection. I heard my mother's voice, frantic and scared, somewhere beyond the curtain. Someone started an IV, cold fluid rushing into my arm. "Stay with us, Anthony," a voice said. I tried to be brave, but tears leaked from my eyes, hot and silent. The last thing I saw was the anesthesiologist's gentle smile as the world faded to black. I tried to nod, but darkness kept pulling at the edges of my vision. I thought about my mom, about how she always told me to be careful. I wondered if she'd be angry or just scared. I pushed the scooter faster. I tried to call out, but my voice was weak, strangled by pain and fear. The footsteps quickened, and suddenly a face appeared above me, eyes wide with shock. "Don't move," she said, her voice trembling. "Help is coming." Not noticing the uneven patch of pavement ahead, paramedics swarmed around me, their voices calm but urgent. They cut away my jeans, exposing the broken bone, the blood, the raw wound. One of them pressed a gloved hand to my shoulder and told me to squeeze if I needed to scream. I squeezed hard. The one that always caught the rain. Rain had been falling for hours, leaving the world glistening under the streetlights. I relished the freedom, no cars, no parents, but the agony was instant and total. I screamed again, louder this time, hoping anyone would hear. The world seemed to shrink to the circle of light around me, the rest of the street swallowed by darkness and rain. The scooter lay a few feet away, wheels still spinning as if mocking my helplessness. Just the rush of wind and the rhythmic slap of water beneath the wheels. My hoodie was damp, but I didn't care. I felt invincible. Slicing through puddles, the city my playground. But there was a tension in the air. It happened in a blink. The front wheel hit the jagged edge of the broken sidewalk, and the scooter jerked violently to the side. My hands slipped on the wet grips. I felt my body lift, weightless for a split second, and then gravity seized me. Time slowed. Every detail etched in my mind, the glint of a streetlight on the wet ground, the sound of my own gasp, the sickening certainty that I was about to hit hard. Instinct took over. I tried to jump clear, but my foot caught the scooter's deck. I landed awkwardly, all my weight crashing down on my right leg. There was a sound sharp, unnatural, like a thick branch snapping in winter. Pain exploded through my body, hot and electric, and I screamed, before I even hit the ground. I looked down and saw my leg twisted at an impossible angle. Bone jutting through the skin above my ankle, blood pooling on the slick pavement. For a moment, I couldn't process what I was seeing. The pain was so intense it felt unreal, almost distant, as if it belonged to someone else. My vision blurred, and nausea rose in my throat. I tried to move. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time lost all meaning. I heard footsteps, distant at first, then closer. A neighbor's porch light flicked on. The sound of sirens cut through the rain, growing louder, closer. They splinted my leg, the pain so blinding I nearly passed out. Bright lights, the smell of antiseptic voices echoing off tile and glass. They wheeled me into surgery, the ceiling lights blurring overhead. I woke in a fog, my leg heavy and numb, wrapped in layers of bandages and splints. Dull ache throbbed beneath the painkillers. My throat was dry, my mouth full of cotton. I stared at my leg, at the angry stitches and the metal gleaming beneath the skin, and wondered if I'd ever walk the same again. I learned to walk with crutches, then a cane, each step a small victory. Some nights I woke screaming, the pain as sharp as the moment I fell. Other nights I dreamed of running, the wind in my face, the world whole again. My mom sat beside the bed, her eyes red but relieved. The scar on my ankle is still there, a pale line against my skin, but it no longer defines me. I'd also remember the neighbor's kindness, the paramedic's steady hands, my mother's strength. I survived, I healed, and I learned that even the worst breaks can be mended with time, with help, and with the stubborn refusal to give up. I ride my bike now, slower, more careful, but with a new appreciation for every moment. I know how quickly things can change, how 1 second can alter a life. She squeezed my hand and told me it was over. The surgeons had cleaned the wound, set the bone, inserted a titanium rod to hold everything together. Friends visited at first, but their lives moved on. I watched from the sidelines, feeling invisible. The pavement was still uneven, the scar in the concrete matching the one on my leg. I took a deep breath, stepped forward, and let the rain wash over me. I wasn't invincible, but I wasn't broken either. The scar on my leg was a constant reminder of how quickly everything could change. But I kept pushing, kept fighting, determined to reclaim what I'd lost. But it wasn't over. The doctors explained the risk of infection, the need for more surgeries, the long road ahead. Physical therapy was torture. Every session was a battle against pain, against fear, against the memory of that night. My leg was weak, stiff, swollen. School was different too. Months passed. The bone healed, the stitches faded, but the fear lingered. The first time I saw a scooter again, my heart raced, palms sweating. I avoided the street where I crashed, the memory too raw. But my therapist said I needed to face it, to prove to myself that I was stronger than the accident. One rainy afternoon, I stood at the edge of the sidewalk, staring at the spot where it all happened. A year later, I can walk without a limp. I remember the pain, the fear, the helplessness. The Amazon wasn't a place. It was a living, breathing beast. Every vine coiled like a muscle. Every leaf dripped like saliva. Kevin, Marcus, Carl, and I joked about adventure as we hacked through ferns taller than men. But our laughter died when the storm hit. Rain didn't fall here. It attacked. It turned the ground into a sucking quicksand trap, and in one heartbeat, my boot slipped on moss-slicked rock. I tumbled down a ravine, thorns tearing my arms, my scream lost in the thunder. I lashed rotting logs into a raft with one hand, my broken wrists screaming. For 3 days, the current dragged me past anacondas draped like wet ropes over branches, past caimans grinning with dagger teeth. At dusk, bats dropped from the ceiling. I swung my machete, connecting with a sickening thud. The creature spasmed in my hands, wings like torn leather. I bit into its chest, blood metallic on my tongue. It kept me alive. Barely. Marcus drowned. Carl vanished. The jungle hadn't killed me. It had remade me. Now, when I close my eyes, I still feel its breath hot, wet, hungry. I smell decay on rainy days, but I go back because the green darkness is in my bones, and it remembers me. Rain scoured my skin raw. When the raft shattered on black rocks, the river swallowed me. Water filled my nose, my mouth thick with silt, and the taste of drowned things. I fought the current, my infected leg a dead weight. When I clawed back up, bleeding and disoriented, the jungle had erased them. My calf was a horror, black at the edges, crawling with maggots. I scooped them out with shaking fingers, retching at the squirm of them. But it was only howler monkeys, their shrieks like mocking laughter. The hope crushed me. I carved my name into the chapel wall with a stone. Yossi was here, a tombstone for no one to find. I ate a fist-sized spider, legs prickling my throat. That night I dreamed of my mother's kitchen warm bread, honey, light. I woke to a bat chewing my infected leg. I didn't shoo it away. Delirium painted the trees with Marcus's face. You left us to die. I ate termites, their bodies bursting bitter on my tongue. And then I saw it. A crumbling chapel, half-eaten by vines, its wooden cross tilted like a broken bone. I crawled inside, blood smearing the dirt floor. Bats shrieked in the rafters. I curled beneath a rotting pew and sobbed. Not for rescue. For the mercy of quick death. No footprints, no echoes. Just the hiss of rain on leaves and the creak of ancient trees shifting in the wind. My ankle throbbed with every step a broken metronome, counting down my death. Fire ants swarmed my legs, burying stingers until my skin blistered and wept. My leg was a putrid log, my wrist a twisted root. I stopped waiting for death. I welcomed it. In boots crunching gravel, voices speaking Spanish. 3 loggers stared at me as I crawled from the chapel, a skeleton caked in mud and blood. They crossed themselves. One vomited. They lifted me onto a mule, every jolt agony. I babbled in Hebrew, English, nonsense. I drank from stagnant pools, the water reeking of rotting leaves, and gagged down grubs squirming in rotten logs. Hunger was a rat gnawing my ribs. Thirst sandpapered my throat. My backpack hung in tatters, supplies swallowed by mud. A thorn scratch on my calf turned angry overnight, a map of red lines spreading under my skin. Pus oozed yellow-green, smelling like death. Fever cooked my brain. I saw Carl's face in the bark of a kapok tree, his mouth opening to whisper, "You're already dead." Marcus laughed from the shadows. When I stumbled into a sinkhole, my wrist snapped with a sound like dry kindling. The bone didn't break skin, but it hung crooked and useless. That night, jaguar eyes reflected my fire-too-cold embers watching. I threw a burning branch. It hissed into darkness. The eyes didn't blink. A gash above my eye wept blood into my vision. Worse, my ankle screamed when I put weight on it, swollen and hot beneath my boot. Night fell like a suffocating blanket. I built a fire with trembling hands, but its light only made the darkness thicker. Shapes moved just beyond the flames. Glowing eyes, rustling leaves. Was it a jaguar? A snake? Or just the jungle playing tricks? I gripped my machete, whispering, "I see you." The lie tasted like bile. Survival became a war against decay. Then the jungle's poison took hold. The Tuichi River was a brown god, violent, indifferent. I washed ashore on a gravel bar, vomiting river sludge. The chapel stank of bat guano and despair. I drank rainwater from a crack in the floor, mixing it with my own urine to stretch it. One dawn, I heard voices. Human voices. I lurched outside, screaming, "Here, I'm here." I'd become part of the rot. At the La Paz hospital, doctors peeled maggots from my leg with tweezers. They drilled pins into my wrist. "You walked 120 miles, they said. The first days at sea were a dream. My little sloop, Napoleon Solo, danced over the waves as I charted a course from the Canary Islands toward the Caribbean. On the 6th night, a storm rose from nowhere, winds shrieking, waves towering over my tiny boat. I huddled in the raft, soaked and shivering, the wind howling like a living thing. My ribs ached from being slammed against the hull during the storm. Each breath a reminder that I was injured and utterly alone. I inventoried my supplies by touch. A little water, a bit of food, a flare gun, a survival manual, not nearly enough. I fought the tiller, heart pounding, every muscle straining. Then a deafening crack, a sudden rush of water. Napoleon Solo was mortally wounded. My supplies were nearly gone. My lips cracked and bled, marked only by the rising and setting of the sun. My wounds festered, the broken ribs refusing to heal. The cold seeped into my bones, and the pain in my side made it impossible to rest. I hallucinated voices on the wind, saw lights that weren't there. I clung to memories of home, my mother's voice, the warmth of a kitchen, the feel of solid ground beneath my feet. I became obsessed with water, how much I had, how much I needed. I rigged a solar still, praying for even a few drops each day. Sometimes clouds would gather and rain would fall, and I would open my mouth to the sky, weeping with gratitude. My skin blistered. I dreamed of rain, of cold water, bird guts, anything with moisture or fat. I became an animal, surviving by instinct and desperation. Of the taste of bread, I began to talk to myself, to the birds that circled overhead, to the raft itself. Anything to keep the loneliness at bay. I rigged my spear gun and tried to catch fish, but my hands shook from weakness, and the pain in my ribs made every movement torture. I managed to snag a few flying fish that landed in the raft at night, their silver bodies flopping in the darkness. Ate them raw, bones and all. Sharks circled the raft, their fins slicing through the water. I watched them with a mixture of awe and terror. Once a shark rammed the raft, sending a jolt of agony through my ribs.
Ow.
I screamed at it, brandishing my spear gun, half mad with fear. gagging on the taste but grateful for the calories. I lashed myself to the raft, terrified of being tossed into the black water. I tried to splint them with scraps of plastic and fabric, but the swelling and bruising only worsened. The salt sores began raw patches where the raft's floor rubbed my skin. I tried to clean them, but the salt water only made them burn. I watched the horizon, desperate for a ship or a plane. None came. Each cough sent daggers through my side. Sleep was a luxury. Every time I drifted off, a wave or a spasm of pain would snap me awake. The stars wheeled overhead indifferent. I whispered to myself a litany of hope and denial. Someone will come. Someone has to come. But as dawn broke, the sea was empty, and I was a speck in a hostile infinity. In minutes, she was sinking beneath me, and I scrambled for the life raft, grabbing what I could. A spear gun, a solar still, a duffel of supplies. The world narrowed to a yellow rubber bubble and the endless heaving sea. The Atlantic was vast, but I felt prepared. Years of sailing, careful planning, a stubborn belief in my own resourcefulness. The sunsets were molten gold and the nights shimmered with stars. I was alone but not lonely. The ocean was my companion, and I trusted her moods. But the sea is never truly tamed. The darkness pressed in, thick and absolute. Fear gnawed at me, but I forced myself to focus. Pain became my constant companion. My ribs throbbed with every movement, every jolt of the raft. I rationed my water and food, but hunger and thirst grew sharper each day. By the first week, the sun was relentless. The days blurred together. The nights were the worst. The ocean was not empty, but the sea also gave. I learned to fish with my spear gun to catch birds that landed on the raft. I ate everything fish eyes. The raft became my world, a yellow, rubber womb and a floating coffin. I patched leaks with tape and prayer, terrified of a puncture I couldn't fix. Each sunrise was a victory, each sunset a reprieve. I dreamed of rescue, of feasts, of laughter. Sometimes I woke from these dreams sobbing, the emptiness more profound than ever. I began to accept the possibility of death, but I refused to surrender. I talked to the raft, to the birds, to the sea. I told myself stories, recited poetry, anything to keep my mind from unraveling. I was alone, but I was alive, not yet. The waves tossed the raft like a toy, slamming me against the rubber walls. But I knew the truth. I was just a man who refused to die, who clung to hope when hope was all that was left. The ocean had tried to break me, but I had survived. And I would never forget what it had taught me about fear, about pain, and about the stubborn, wild will to live. My ribs screamed, and I thought they might break again. My ribs ached with every breath. My sores oozed pus. I was always thirsty, always hungry. I thought of giving up, of slipping into the sea and letting it take me. But something inside me refused. I thought of my family, of the people who loved me. I owed them my fight. Water poured in, soaking my supplies, ruining what little food I had left. I bailed water with my hands, teeth chattering, body racked with pain. The salt sores spread, some turning black with infection. I cleaned them as best I could, but the pain was constant, a low hum beneath everything. I marked the days on the raft side, a tally of survival. I promised everything my future, my soul if only I could live. Deprivation played tricks on my mind. I saw ships on the horizon, heard voices calling my name, screamed, waved my arms, fired my last flare. The fishermen saw me, their faces wide with shock and pity. They hauled me aboard, their hands gentle, their voices soft. I wept, the pain and relief overwhelming. But hope was a stubborn thing. I kept my routines, fishing, patching, rationing water. Another storm hit, weeks into my ordeal. When the storm passed, I was weaker than ever, but still alive. I patched the raft, dried my supplies, and started over. Survival was a cycle of loss and adaptation, of hope and despair. By the 10th week, I was a skeleton, my skin stretched tight over bone. I watched the horizon, eyes burning, heart pounding. I whispered to the sea, begging for rescue. On the 76th day, I saw a shape on the horizon, a boat, real and solid. In the hospital, they counted my ribs, my sores, my scars. They called me a miracle. Wrangel Island rose from the frozen sea like a broken tooth, a place of howling winds and endless white. I joined the expedition for money, for my sick son Bennett, but nothing prepared me for this desolation. Night's cough deepened, rattling like stones in a tin. One morning, a trap sprung wrong. The iron jaws slammed shut on my right hand. Pain exploded, bone grinding against metal. I screamed, wrenching free. Blood dripped onto the snow, blooming like poppies. 2 fingers hung crooked, already swelling purple. I staggered back to the shack, clutching my hand to my chest, sobbing. I ate it raw, the blood warm on my tongue. The meat was stringy, bitter, but it silenced the gnawing in my gut. That night I buried the bones deep. Bears smelled weakness. I dreamed of the bear's jaws closing on my neck, Bennett calling my name. I huddled by the blubber lamp, carving a doll for Bennett from walrus tusk. My hand festered. Green streaks climbed my wrist. I lanced the wound with a needle, screaming as poison oozed out. Outside, the aurora writhed ghostly greens that offered no warmth. "Bennett needs you," I chanted. "Don't faint." It rammed the shack, claws tearing at the roof. I fired the rifle through a crack. The shot went wide. It roared, saliva freezing on its muzzle. I reloaded one-handed, fumbling cartridges. My ribs jutted like shipwrecks. One morning, I found bear tracks circling the shack. They'd grown bolder. "Aim for the eye," Knight's voice echoed. The second shot hit its shoulder. It retreated, leaving blood on the snow. Crawford paced, muttering about the plan. When they announced they'd crossed the sea ice for Siberia, I begged to stay. "You'll die out here alone," Knight warned. His eyes were hollow. I clutched my son's photograph. "Better than out there," I whispered. The wind shrieked like a dying thing. I counted days on the wall, 60 crosses, then 100. "You shouldn't have come, Ada," she murmured. Bennett coughed in the corner. I reached for him. My hand passed through smoke. The shack filled with voices, Crawford cursing, Knight gasping, Gauls singing a shanty. I covered my ears. "Stop," I screamed. Silence. Only the crack of expanding ice. They left me with a rifle, 40 rounds, and a tin of matches. The last sled vanished into the white. Silence swallowed the world. The men Knight, Crawford, Moorer, and Gaul treated me like baggage, their eyes skittering away from mine. We built a shack from driftwood and whale ribs, the cold gnawing through caribou hides. Every movement sent lightning up my arm. Outside, a polar bear's roar shook the walls. I scraped lichen from rocks, boiled leather boots into broth. My hand throbbed, the skin tight and hot. I tried to set a trap one-handed, but the fox stole the bait. Desperation drove me onto the ice. I found a seal hole, waited for hours. When one surfaced, I stabbed with my harpoon. It slid off the blubber. The seal vanished. I collapsed, weeping. I gripped the rifle with my good hand, tears freezing on my cheeks. That night, fever dreams took me. Bennett's cough, my mother singing, the trap's jaws snapping shut again. At night, polar bears circled, their breath fogging the windows. I sewed boots and mittens, my needle trembling. It's just 1 year, I told myself. Then home to Bennett. But the ice never thawed. Game vanished. Alone, I became a ghost. I set fox traps, my fingers numb in the -40 degrees Fahrenheit chill. I splinted the fingers with driftwood scraps, wrapping them in torn seal skin. Food ran low. A week later, I caught a young fox. It came at dusk, a male, starving, its ribs stark under yellowed fur. I barred the door with a whalebone. My hand pulsed, the splint sticky with pus. Winter's darkness was absolute. The sun vanished for months. I talked to the doll. "When we go home," I whispered, "we'll eat reindeer stew. You'll be strong again." Hallucinations came. My mother sat by the fire, mending a parka. I ate candle wax to fill my belly. My ribs jutted like shipwrecks. One morning, I found bear tracks circling the shack. They'd grown bolder, its feathers matted with oil. I rendered the fat, drinking it hot. Energy sparked in my veins. I rebuilt the traps, my crippled hand clumsy but functional. Spring brought fog and dripping ice. My hand healed crooked, 2 fingers fused at the joint. Shot an eider duck, then a miracle. A walrus carcass washed ashore. I butchered it, hacking blubber with my knife. The meat was rancid, but I dried strips on the roof. For the first time in months, I felt full. I stayed. It survived this long. I saw it on a rare clear day. A steamer, black smoke, staining the sky. I fired my last flare. It arced, my crippled hand aching. Sputtered, died. The ship sailed on. I fell to my knees, howling. Hope was a knife twisting in my gut. I showed them my hand, the twisted fingers, the scarred knuckles. The bears were afraid of me, I said. That night I considered walking south. The ice was rotten, hungry, feeling the trap's jaws on my hand. Bennett is grown. I work as a seamstress, my crooked fingers slow but steady. When the wind howls, I hear Wrangle calling the crack of ice, the bears roar. I promised I'd come back, I whispered. They came on August 19th, 1923, a schooner slicing through the pack ice. I waved a caribou hide, my voice raw from shouting. Our old Noyes stepped onto the shore, his eyes wide at my emaciation. The others? He asked. I shook my head. Gone. As we sailed away, I looked back at Wrangle. The shack was a speck in the white. I clutched Bennett's doll. Nome was a blur of noise and faces. Reporters swarmed. How did you survive? Were you afraid? Bennett was waiting, thinner but alive. I held him with my good arm, breathing in his scent. Years later, I still wait, gasping. I survived not for fame, but for a promise. The Arctic tried to break me. It only made me unbreakable. The outback stretched before me, endless and shimmering under the merciless Australian sun. My battered car rumbled along the lonely highway, the radio crackling with static as I searched for a signal. The land was both beautiful and menacing, dotted with twisted trees and the occasional carcass of a kangaroo. My instinct said to keep driving, but decency won out. Darkness closed in, and I realized too late that I'd been drugged. The last thing I remembered was the stranger's face looming over me, and the sensation of being dragged across gravel. Then nothing but blackness and the taste of fear. My car was gone, my wallet and phone missing, stripped of everything except the shredded clothes on my back. The sun beat down, baking the ground beneath my bare feet. I scanned the horizon for any sign of life, but there was nothing but endless red and the distant shimmer of heat. I was utterly alone, injured, and at the mercy of the outback. The silence was absolute, broken only by the distant caw of a crow circling overhead. I found a shallow depression in the earth and curled up, shivering uncontrollably. Every sound in the night seemed amplified, the rustle of lizards, the distant howl of dingoes, the whisper of wind through dry grass. I screamed for help, but the vast emptiness swallowed my voice. Slowed, rolled down the window, and listened as he spun a story about a broken-down car and needing a lift. He offered me a drink and I accepted, hoping to show goodwill. The liquid burned my throat, and within minutes, the world began to tilt. I dreamed of being buried again, of clawing at the earth while unseen hands pushed me down. Each time I woke, I was grateful for the cold air, the stars above, and the simple fact that I was still breathing. I felt a thrill of freedom, but also a flicker of unease. Out here, help was a distant hope, and the line between life and death was razor thin. Every mile seemed to pull me deeper into a world where the rules were different, where civilization faded and the land belonged to the wild. I was chasing a new job, a new start, and the promise of adventure, never suspecting that I was driving straight into a nightmare. Red dust billowed behind me, painting the rearview mirror with a haze that blurred the past. I spotted him by the roadside. Stranger waving for help, his face hidden beneath a battered hat. My vision blurred, my limbs heavy as lead. I tried to speak, but my tongue felt thick and useless. I awoke in suffocating darkness, my mouth full of grit, my body pressed on all sides by cool, damp earth. Panic surged through me as I realized I'd been buried alive. I thrashed, dirt filling my nose and ears, my shoulders screaming in agony. Every breath was a battle against the crushing weight above me. Desperation lent me strength. I clawed upward, nails splitting, muscles burning, until finally my fingers broke through to sunlight. I gasped, coughing up sand, and dragged myself from the shallow grave. The sun was blinding, the air scorching, but I was alive, barely. My shoulder throbbed, dislocated and useless, as I lay sprawled on the red earth, sobbing with relief and terror. I staggered to my feet, every movement sending white-hot pain through my shoulder. The landscape was unforgiving. As darkness fell, the temperature plummeted. The searing heat of day gave way to a bone-deep chill that seeped through my skin. Sleep came in fitful bursts, haunted by nightmares of suffocation and darkness. I dreamed of being buried again, of clawing at the earth while unseen hands pushed me down. Each time I woke, I was grateful for the cold air, the stars above, and the simple fact that I was still breathing. Hunger gnawed at my insides, sharp and insistent. I searched for anything edible, roots, leaves, beetles, forcing myself to chew and swallow things I'd never imagined putting in my mouth. During the day, I saw the tracks of snakes and lizards winding through the dust, and once, the flash of a goanna's tail as it vanished into the scrub. At night, eyes glinted in the darkness. Dingoes, I guessed, circling just beyond the reach of my voice. My skin blistered and peeled under the relentless sun, and insects bit my ankles raw. I dug for grubs and chewed on wild grass, gagging at the bitterness. My wounds festered, sticky with pus, and I grew weaker, my body shrinking as hunger and dehydration took their toll. Other times, I saw my own grave, the earth closing in. The outback was inside my head now, and I wondered if I'd ever escape. Their howls echoed across the plain, a reminder that I was not alone. I knew that staying in one place meant certain death. I followed animal tracks and dry creek beds, hoping they might lead me to water or a road. The outback was vast and indifferent, but I refused to give in. I stumbled upon a muddy dam and drank the foul water, ignoring the taste and the risk. I watched the sky for birds, hoping they might lead me to water, but mostly they just circled, waiting for me to fall. I talked to the sky, to the ants crawling over my legs, to the ghosts of my past. I relived the attack and the burial over and over, each memory sharper than the last. My shoulder was swollen and useless, so I tore strips from my shirt to fashion a crude sling. Every step was agony, but I forced myself to keep moving. The outback is never truly empty. One night, a dingo crept close, its teeth bared and eyes fixed on me. I hurled a rock and screamed, my voice raw with fear and defiance. The animal retreated, but only a few paces. I realized then that out here I was not the hunted. Time lost all meaning. Each day was a battle to survive. I marked the days with stones, refusing to let the desert erase me. The line between dream and reality blurred. I saw figures on the horizon, rescuers, I thought, but when I staggered toward them, they melted into mirages. Sometimes I heard my mother's voice, gentle and insistent, telling me to get up, to keep fighting. Other times, I saw my own grave, the earth closing in. The outback was inside my head now, and I wondered if I'd ever escape. My body was little more than skin and bone, my ribs sharp beneath sunburned flesh, but something inside me refused to surrender. I forced myself to crawl each day, searching for a road, a fence, any sign of life. I found a stagnant puddle and drank, ignoring the taste and the wriggling larvae. I ate leeches, frogs, anything that moved. But the voices grew louder, closer, and then hands were lifting me, wrapping me in blankets. Relief crashed over me, so intense it was almost pain. I marked each sunrise as a victory, each night survived as a triumph. I would not let the desert win. I clung to hope with a ferocity that surprised me. The land remembers, and so do I. My wounds were infected, my mind clouded with fever and exhaustion. I was little more than a skeleton, covered in sores and sunburn. I lay in the dirt, barely able to move, when I heard voices, real voices, not the ones in my head. I tried to shout, but only a croak escaped my cracked lips. 71 days blurred into one long nightmare. I blinked against the sun, unsure if I was hallucinating again. Cattle station workers found me, their faces masks of shock and pity. They gave me water, their hands gentle as they helped me into the shade. I wept, the tears hot and bitter. I struggled to believe it was real, that I was safe, but I survived. I learned that the will to live is stronger than fear, stronger than pain, stronger than the wild itself. I am marked by the desert, but I am not broken. But the taste of cool water, the feel of clean sheets, and the sound of human voices slowly brought me back. In the hospital, doctors told me I had lost over 120 pounds. My body was a roadmap of scars, my shoulder permanently damaged, but I was alive. The world seemed too bright, too loud after so long in the silence. The outback still haunts my dreams. I see the endless sky, feel the weight of earth on my chest, taste the grit in my mouth. Now, when I see the red dust swirling on the horizon, I remember the lesson carved into my bones. In the wild, you are never truly alone. The forest pressed in on both sides, a wall of black pines and snowdrifts. The heater in my old Saab barely worked, but I pressed on, determined to reach the next town before nightfall. I tried to reverse, but the tires only spun. I was stuck. I stepped out, and the cold slapped me, stealing my breath. Snow was falling faster now, the world shrinking to a circle of white, and the hum of my engine. The radio was just static, my phone battery dead. Hadn't seen another car for hours. The cold bit through my jacket, numbing my fingers. The headlights faded to a dull glow, then nothing. I thought about my family, about the meals we'd shared, the warmth of a kitchen. The memories made the ache in my belly worse. I was entombed, the car, a tiny bubble in a world of ice. Every time I drifted off, I woke with a jolt, convinced I was suffocating. I searched the car for food, found a half-eaten chocolate bar, some old crackers, a bottle of water, rationed them, forcing myself to take tiny bites, tiny sips. My foot was swelling, purple and angry. Tried to move it, but pain shot up my leg. Cracked a window, but the cold poured in like water. I wondered if I had made a mistake, if I should have tried to walk for help before the storm sealed me in. Panic fluttered in my chest. I told myself the storm would pass, that someone would come. But as the hours dragged on, hope began to slip away. I climbed back inside, shivering, and turned the engine up. The storm howled, rattling the windows, piling snow higher and higher around the car. The snow thickened, swirling in the headlights, erasing the road. I told myself I'd be fine, but the unease in my gut grew heavier with every mile. Suddenly, the wheels spun out, the car shuddered, and I slid off the road into a shallow ditch. I tried to dig the car out with my hands, but the snow was too deep, my gloves too thin. I watched the snow swallow the world inch by inch. The temperature dropped so low, the air inside the car sparkled with frost. My breath fogged the windows, turning them to milky glass. Wrapped myself in every piece of clothing. I had jackets, socks, even the car's floor mats. My foot throbbed from where I'd twisted it in the snow. I tried to massage warmth back into my toes, but they stayed stubbornly cold. Sleep came in fits and starts. By the second day, my stomach was a hollow drum. The hunger sharpened my senses. Every creak of the car, every groan of shifting snow outside, made my heart race. I thought about my family, about the meals we'd shared, the warmth of a kitchen. The memories made the ache in my belly worse. Days blurred together in a cycle of cold, hunger, and pain. The snow pressed tighter against the car, muffling all sound. It was like being buried alive. Sometimes I screamed just to hear my own voice. The sound was small, swallowed by the insulation of snow and steel. The heater sputtered out, leaving only silence and the relentless cold. I piled everything I could over myself, jackets, papers, even the car manual. My breath formed icicles on my beard. I could feel the cold seeping into my bones, slowing my thoughts, making my eyelids heavy. My foot grew worse. I tried to keep it elevated, but the cramped space made it impossible. I slapped my face, pinched my arms, anything to stay awake. I couldn't let myself drift off, not now. I imagined I heard voices outside, footsteps crunching in the drifts. I pressed my ear to the window, but heard only my own heartbeat. The pain was a constant throb, a reminder that I was trapped not just by snow, but by my own broken body. The car's battery died on the 5th day. Then I'd wake to the cold, to the ache in my foot, to the silence. Loneliness was a weight heavier than the snow. I tapped on the roof, hoping to scare it away. Sound vanished, replaced by the soft groan of settling snow. I wondered if the animals could smell me, if they were waiting for me to die. I knew the signs of hypothermia. Shivering gave way to numbness, then a strange, dangerous warmth. Isolation gnawed at me. I began to talk to myself, to the car, to the snow. I was a trespasser in their world, a morsel trapped in a metal shell. Dreams and reality blurred. I saw my mother, her hands warm on my face. I saw summer fields, green and bright. One night, I heard a faint scratching above. I froze, heart pounding. Was it a fox? A lynx? Sometimes I imagined the forest alive with eyes, watching, waiting. I was a trespasser in their world, a morsel trapped in a metal shell. My foot was a swollen lump, the skin stretched shiny and pale. I tried to flex my toes, but they barely moved. Frostbite set in, turning the tips waxy and numb. My hands cracked and bled. My lips split, every word a sting. I pictured the snow melting, the sun shining through the windshield, the sound of birds. I promised myself I would see my family again. I would not let the cold win. I drifted in and out of consciousness, dreams filled with light and warmth. Sometimes I thought I heard engines, voices, rescue. But always I woke to the cold, to the silence, to the ache of survival. I grew weaker. Even sitting up became a struggle. My heart pounded, slow and heavy. I forced myself to drink melted snow, to eat tiny crumbs of anything I could find. I knew I was starving, but the hunger had faded to a dull ache. I told myself stories to stay sane, stories of rescue, of warmth, of spring. Some days, I wanted to give up. I imagined closing my eyes and letting the cold take me. Voices muffled but unmistakable. I tried to shout, but my throat was raw. I pounded weakly on the window. But something inside, my stubbornness, hope, fear kept me fighting. I scratched marks on the dashboard, counting the days, refusing to disappear. By the 7th week, I was little more than skin and bone. My foot was useless, my body numb. I wondered if anyone was looking for me, if my name was in the papers. The cold outside was nothing compared to the warmth of rescue. I wept, unable to speak as they wrapped me in blankets and carried me to safety. I prayed, not for a miracle, but for the strength to last one more day. A rumble woke Muriel, not imagined. I blinked, disoriented, as light filtered through a gap in the snow. The snow was cleared away, the door wrenched open. Faces stared in disbelief. Hands pulled me into the light. The forest was alive with the crisp scent of pine and the distant chatter of magpies. I set out before sunrise, trail shoes crunching over frost-lace needles, my breath a ghost in the chill. The trail narrowed, slick from last night's rain. I leaped a fallen log, but my foot landed wrong. A patch of moss, slick as ice. My ankle twisted, my leg buckled, and I heard a crack so loud it seemed to echo through the trees. Pain exploded up my leg. I collapsed, clutching my shin. The world spun. When I looked down, my foot was twisted at an impossible angle, bone jutting beneath the skin. I screamed, the sound swallowed by the endless trees. The Bob Marshall wilderness always felt like home. Vast, wild, a place where I could lose myself and find myself at the same time. I followed the switchbacks higher. Adrenaline and endorphins made the world sharp and bright. I ran for the joy of it, for the quiet, for the way the mountains made my worries small. I never imagined that by noon my world would shrink to pain, panic, and the desperate will to survive. The trail narrowed, slick from last night's rain. I leapt a fallen log, but my foot landed wrong, a patch of moss, slick as ice. When I looked down, my foot was twisted at an impossible angle, bone jutting beneath the skin. Screamed, the sound swallowed by the endless trees. I was alone, injured, and miles from help. Every movement sent fresh waves of agony through my body. I gritted my teeth, cursing and gasping, but I managed to bind the leg tightly. It wasn't perfect, but it was all I had. My ankle twisted, my leg buckled, and I heard a crack so loud it seemed to echo through the trees. My mind raced. How far was I from the trailhead? Did anyone know where I was? The pain was a living thing, pulsing with every heartbeat. Pain exploded up my leg, collapsed, clutching my shin, the world spinning. Blood seeped through my sock, and the swelling was already monstrous. I fumbled for my phone, but there was no signal, just the blank, indifferent face of the screen. I listened for voices, for the sound of rescue, but heard only the wind and the distant call of a hawk. The realization hit me. I might not make it out. The fear was cold and deep, but I refused to let it root me to the spot. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I bit it back. I had to act. No one was coming. For a moment, I lay there, shivering in shock, sweat beading on my forehead despite the cold. I forced myself to assess the damage. My leg was broken badly. I tore my shirt into strips and fashioned a crude splint with sticks and shoelaces. As I worked, the forest seemed to close in, the shadows growing longer. I listened for voices, for the sound of rescue, but heard only the wind and the distant call of a hawk. The realization hit me. I might not make it out. The fear was cold and deep, but I refused to let it root me to the spot. My world narrowed to the scrape of my body against earth, the taste of blood in my mouth, and the relentless ache in my leg. With my leg useless, walking was impossible. I began to crawl, dragging myself inch by inch down the trail, my broken limb trailing behind. The ground was rough, littered with stones and roots that tore at my hands and knees. Each movement was a battle between willpower and pain. I set small goals: reach that boulder, that bend in the path, that patch of sunlight. Time lost all meaning. I imagined bears, wolves, mountain lions, predators, drawn by the scent of blood. Sleep was impossible. I lay awake, counting the stars through the branches, praying for dawn. I chewed pine needles and sucked on pebbles to keep my mouth moist. The cold revived me, but I knew it wouldn't last. The wilderness was beautiful, but it was also merciless. I was just another animal, wounded and alone. Every muscle ached, and my broken leg throbbed with a sickening pulse. I huddled beneath a fallen log, wrapping myself in my jacket, shivering uncontrollably. The forest came alive with unfamiliar sounds. The snap of twigs, the distant howl of a coyote, the rustle of something large moving through the brush. Hours passed. My water bottle was nearly empty, and hunger gnawed at my stomach. I found a trickle of water in a hollow and drank greedily, splashing it over my face. As darkness fell, the temperature plummeted. Fear gnawed at me. I clutched a stick, heart pounding, every shadow a threat. I remember pulling on my insulated suit, zipping it all the way to my chin, and watching the steam from my breath fog my goggles. It was early, still dim outside, but that's how it always began. Quiet, solitary. I like to scout new formations before taking guests out. That day I was alone on Vetnikal Glacier, southeast Iceland. I had a route in Minda, hollowed-out ice tunnel that had formed a few weeks prior. I'd seen photos online from another guide. Unreal colors, cyan blue walls that looked lit from within. I walked an hour across the frozen field. Crampons clicked beneath each step, the sky overhead like cold slate. I descended into the crevasse slowly, my ice axe tapping at the walls. I wasn't scared. I'd done this 100 times. But looking back, I remember one moment. A draft, low groan from inside the ice. A crampon had caught during the fall and wrenched my ankle. Not unusual, but that sound stayed with me. Like breath held too long, the light from my helmet bounced off shimmering blue walls, and the ice beneath my boots looked solid, clear. I stepped into a narrow corridor barely shouldered width. I took another step, and the world fell out from under me. But when I landed, the pain shot straight up my left leg. It folded beneath me at a wrong angle. My foot dropped. Then my leg. I reached for the side, but the edges were slick and I slipped. It wasn't a full collapse, more like the floor had been glass, and I stepped straight through it. The fall wasn't far, maybe 10 or 12 feet. I screamed before I knew I was hurt. My leg had bent sideways, knee intact, but the shin was twisted. The worst part, the radio clip to my harness had shattered. I was inside a chamber, maybe 10 feet across, the ceiling low and uneven. I tried to stand, but the pain was immediate, radiating, blinding. Everything echoed my breath, my heartbeat, the crunch of movement. I reached into my coat for the emergency beacon, a tiny red switch. But the impact had jarred the casing loose. It blinked, then flickered out. Just like that, I was off the grid. My breath fogged the space above me in shallow clouds. I remember thinking, I laid there, staring at the curved ice ceiling. They won't start looking for at least 6 hours. That was protocol. Guides were expected to check in at the end of their solo runs, not before. So I waited. And as I waited, I realized how quiet it was. No wind, no birds, no crackling walkie. There was no light change, no sunbeam movement, just constant static cold. Just the drip of melting ice, It's in me. Time slowed down inside that cave. Melted snow with a body-warmed canteen. I went through all the motions. I made a splint with my ice axe and climbing strap. I tightened it to keep the swelling down. I chewed on protein cubes. Once I thought I saw another person staring back at me, my own face, warped by the wall. I blinked, and it was gone. But the real test wasn't physical. It was mental.
Oh.
The way you cry when you don't want to hear it yourself. And I began to worry I might not make it to morning. I saw things in the ice, shadows, reflections. Around hour 12, the cold began to feel like part of me. My fingers turned stiff, even inside gloves. That night I cried, quietly. But 10 minutes later, I heard footsteps crunching above. I don't know if I slept. I must have drifted in and out. At some point, I thought I heard someone calling my name. A voice from the tunnel above, muffled, far away. I yelled back until my throat burned, but there was no reply. Later, I realized it was the wind echoing down into the shaft, a trick of acoustics, but it gave me hope. I took out my flare-my, one red flarend, waited for light. The moment I saw faint gray seep into the cracks above, I pulled the trigger. It hissed upward in a slow arc, igniting the cave in crimson light, and silence again, nothing. I thought I'd wasted it. When I finally saw sky again, it was the most colorless thing I'd ever seen, but it felt like sunlight. They airlifted me to a Reykjavik hospital, but I still guide. I still dream of the place below the glacier. Not nightmares. More like memories that don't want to fade. I don't know exactly why I wanted to go alone. Maybe I liked the solitude. Maybe I just didn't want to hear anyone else breathing while I worked. I'm a cave geologist. It's mostly mapping and cataloging. This lava tube had indeed been surveyed fully, one of the longer spurs off the Kazumura system in Hawaii. The entrance was narrow, hidden behind a collapsed rockfall. I'd been there once before with a guide group. We didn't go far. How sound got swallowed down there. Like every breath vanished into stone. But I remembered something strange about it. That day I parked alone, packed my gear, helmet light, chalk string, backup torch, protein bars, a liter of water. A simple route: go 400 meters in, map the pocket chamber, take some readings, come back out. No big deal. The ground was black basalt, ridged from ancient lava flows. Every step crunched faintly beneath my boots. Started normal. The air was dry and still, not damp like limestone caves, not watched, just erased. Every sound I made didn't echo. Like the rock wanted silence. Always do. I dropped glow markers every 20 meters. But even then, I had this feeling like I was being absorbed. My headlamp flickered once. Just a little. There's no real sense of ours underground. Could have been in there 20 minutes or 2 hours, it blurs. I tapped it and moved on. By the time I reached the pocket chamber, I'd already lost track of time. I knelt to take a sample from a mineral vein. That's when I heard it. A sound that didn't belong. Not dripping water. Not my breath. It was like a soft click. From deeper in, I finished collecting samples, stood, and turned to go back. Not all of them, but enough that I couldn't trace my exact path. Maybe I kicked them. Maybe they faded faster than expected. Still, my gut twisted. It dropped subtly at first, then more steeply. The walls narrowed, ducked, then crawled. But something wasn't right. My trail markers, those little green glow tabs, were gone. I pressed forward, followed what I thought was my line out. Then the tunnel curved, didn't stop curving. I ended up in a long, sloping descent I didn't remember. After 30 minutes, I knew. I wasn't going the right way. I tried to backtrack, but every direction looked the same. Black glass walls. No markings. No sound. My breath got louder in my ears. That's when the panic started. I sat down to reset, counted out my gear, ate a bar, sipped water. I told myself to calm down. That's when my headlamp flickered again, longer this time, then died. I pulled out my backup flashlight. It was smaller, red light only, emergency mode. It barely lit 5 feet ahead. Suddenly everything felt closer, like the rock was leaning in. I tried my radio, nothing. The signal had no bounce, no static. Just dead. I moved slowly now, each step careful. I started talking out loud, not for any real reason, just to hear something other than silence. My own voice started sounding unfamiliar, like it belonged to someone else. At one point I passed a dead bat. Nothing strange. But its wings were intact, spread, and frozen in motion, like it had fallen mid-flight and never landed. I began to think about time again. How long had I been down there? I turned around and tried new passages. Some ended. Others narrowed so tight I had to exhale just to move through. The hours, or what felt like hours, blurred. I walked, crawled. One chamber had strange markings, not human-made, just odd patterns in the rock that looked deliberate. Loops and spirals. I stared too long and got dizzy. That's when I realized I'd been talking to someone, or something, just muttering, half awake, but repeating a name I didn't recognize. Elias. I don't know an Elias. I sat down again, pressed my back to the wall, and listened. That's when I heard breathing, not mine. Soft, slow right next to me. The tunnel had narrowed to a body's width. My knees were bleeding, my wrists raw from crawling. Natural light, bluish-white, bleeding through a narrow shaft above. I swung the flashlight. Nothing, just black walls and my own reflection in a trickle of water, inch by inch. I climbed using my elbows and feet like a spider in a jar. I don't remember how I found it. Just that, after some time, could have been hours or days, I saw a faint glow. I dragged myself toward it. It's just a face, shocked, then shouting into a radio. The opening was too high. I screamed, cursed, laughed. Then I saw my own flare. I was in my pack, unused. I lit it. The walls turned red, then orange, then blinding white. I jammed the flare into a crack and wedged my back against the wall, pushed upward at the top. I spilled out into a wind tunnel. There was light above, real light, a rescue team's headlamp. I don't remember the words. They'd been searching for 2 days. The Zambezi glittered like liquid gold under the African sun, its surface deceptively calm. I steered the canoe with practiced ease, my clients laughing as kingfishers darted overhead. My paddle dipped silently, the only sound the drip of water and the thump of my own heart. Before I could react, the water exploded. The hippo surged upward, a mountain of wet flesh and rage, its jaws wide enough to swallow a man whole. The canoe flipped like a toy, tossing us into the churn. Cold water stabbed my lungs as I fought toward the surface, disoriented and choking. I remember thinking how the river breathed Hera living, ancient thing. I never sensed the shadow beneath us until it was too late. Hippos are gentle giants, I reassured them, pointing to distant snouts breaking the water. I'd guided these waters for years. I knew their rhythms, their moods. I glimpsed clients flailing, screaming, as the beast submerged again. My guide's instincts screamed, "Get to shore!" But the current dragged me downstream, toward the papyrus thickets where crocodiles lurked. I kicked hard, every stroke a prayer. But that day, the air felt heavy, thick with the scent of papyrus and something else, a primal stillness that raised the hairs on my neck. We rounded a bend where elephant ears fanned the banks. Client gasped, pointing at bubbles fizzing near our stern. Above me, the hippo's silhouette blotted out the sun. I glimpsed clients flailing, screaming as the beast submerged again. My guide's instinct screamed, "Get to shore!" But the current dragged me downstream, toward the papyrus thickets where crocodiles lurked. Bone cracked like dry wood. White-hot pain seared through my ribs. I was underwater, the hippo's mouth a cave of pink flesh and dagger-like teeth. Its tongue shoved against me, pulling me deeper into its throat. One client, Evans, screamed my name from a tree on the bank. The hippo lunged again, but I dove, its teeth grazing my leg. River water mixed with my blood, painting the Zambezi pink. Panic detonated in my skull. It's trying to swallow me alive. I kicked hard, every stroke a prayer. The hippo shook me like a rag, teeth grinding against my hip. I felt my lung collapse, a sickening deflation. Darkness threatened, but I clawed at its palate, ripping skin from my knuckles. Not like this, I thought. Not in the belly of a beast.
What?
Something clamped my torso a vise of teeth and pressure. I jammed my fist into its gullet, gagging on river water and blood. The hippo roared a subsonic blast that vibrated through my bones. It expelled me into the murk, its jaws releasing with a wet, sucking pop. I floated, weightless, trailing blood like smoke. Above, sunlight wavered through the brown water. Swim, my mind shrieked, but my body was led. I broke the surface, gasping. The hippo circled, eyes black and empty as obsidian. One client, Evans, screamed my name from a tree on the bank. The hippo lunged again, but I dove, its teeth grazing my leg. River water mixed with my blood, painting the Zambezi pink. I thought it was over. I'd reached shallow water, crawling through reeds, when the hippo erupted behind me. Its jaws closed on my thigh, lifting me like a doll. The hippo paused, distracted. I went limp, playing dead a trick I'd seen Impala use. For 3 heartbeats it held me. Then it snorted, releasing me into the shallows. I floated, broken, watching it vanish beneath the surface. I felt teeth scrape femur, heard tendons snap. It shook me, drowning my screams in river water. I dragged myself onto a mud bank, each movement a symphony of agony. Evans brandished a paddle, shouting, but their eyes never left me. I focused on the tree of baobab, its roots like gnarled hands. Reach it, I told myself, or die in the open. Evans waded in, hauling me toward the tree line. Stay with me, Paul, he begged. Evans hurled rocks, shouting, Drop him, you bastard! Blood clouded the water around me. My left leg hung useless, bone glinting through torn flesh. Crocodiles slid off nearby logs, drawn by the blood. Evans brandished a paddle, shouting. I pressed a wad of reeds to my ribcage, trying to staunch the lung bleed. Evans radioed for help, voice cracking. Hippo attack, multiple critical. But their eyes never left me. I focused on the tree of baobab, its roots like gnarled hands. As we lifted off, I looked down at the Zambezi. The hippo watched from a sandbar, its mouth half open, as if laughing. Reach it. Vultures circled. Evans draped his shirt over me, but flies found the wounds, laying eggs in the mangled flesh of my leg. I drifted in and out, dreaming of the hippo's throat, hot, wet, endless. I told myself, or die in the open. Evans propped me against the baobab, its bark scraping my wounds. Ants swarmed my legs, biting the raw meat of my thigh. Shock set in. I watched a crocodile slide into the water 10 feet away, its tail whipping the surface. Don't close your eyes, Evans ordered, slapping my face. But the pain was a black tide, pulling me under. Hours bled together. When the helicopter thudded overhead, I barely registered it. Rescuers strapped me to a stretcher, their faces grim. As we lifted off, I looked down at the Zambezi. The hippo watched from a sandbar, its mouth half open, as if laughing. In the Harare hospital, surgeons peeled away my clothes, stiff with dried blood. Broken ribs, punctured lung, compound femur fracture, hip dislocation, massive tissue loss, a nurse dictated. They drilled into my femur to insert a rod, the smell of bone dust, thick in my nose. I'd relive the bite the crack of ribs, the hippo's breath like swamp gas. I'd wake choking, convinced I was drowning in its belly. Nurses held me down as I thrashed, ripping IVs from my arms. Infection set in fast. My leg turned black. Maggots writhed in the wounds. Doctors debated amputation. I begged them to save it time a guide. I need my legs. They scrubbed the rot with wire brushes, a pain so profound I vomited bile. Morphine dreams were worse than the pain. My leg refused to heal. Skin grafts shriveled, bone infections flared. For months, I was a ghost in white halls, listening to other patients breathe. The river was in my veins now, a poison no antibiotic could touch. The day I stood, I wept. My leg, held together by pins, in prayer, buckled. Therapists caught me, their hands impersonal as straps. Again, they urged. I shuffled like a child, sweat dripping onto the parallel bars. Outside, thunder echoed the hippo's roar. I flinched, nearly falling. It's just rain, I told myself. But my body remembered the Zambezi, the weight, the teeth, the dark. Are you sure? One asked. I nodded, pushing the canoe into the water. Papyrus rustled, a hippo surfaced, watching us pass. My hand shook, but I didn't falter. The river had tried to claim me. Now, I claimed it back. A year later, I stood on the riverbank. The Zambezi flowed unchanged. My clients eyed my limp, my scars. We paddled past the attack site. My leg aches before storms. My ribs creak like old wood. At night, I dream of its mouth a red cathedral of teeth. I still guide, but I carry the Hippo with me. Survival isn't victory, it's a pact with memory. The Zambezi taught me that nature isn't cruel. It's hungry, and sometimes it spits you out just so you remember. You're always just meat in the water.